She escaped a brutal sheriff and built a quiet life deep in the mountains until one phone call shattered everything. Daniel Spaulding, a man who once wore a badge like a weapon, found her again, and this time he came to take back what he thought he owned. But Zachary Cole wasn't about to lose someone he loved, not again. And what he did next turned the hunter into the hunted. Just wait until you see how this confrontation unfolded, and why, in the end, justice finally caught up with the past. In the remote reaches of the Cascade Mountains, far beyond where the roads turned to dust and the cell signals faded, lived a man named Zachary Cole, a forest ranger by title, but more accurately a man in exile, not by the courts, but by life itself. He had once worn a firefighter's badge, carried pride in his shoulders and hope in his lungs. That was before the flames, before the night the roof collapsed, and he walked out, but his partner didn't. The department blamed protocol. The town blamed him. Whispers turned to headlines, and friends turned to shadows. When the smoke finally cleared, all that remained was guilt, thick, choking, and permanent. So he vanished into the wilderness where nothing expected explanations. The trees didn't ask questions. The wolves didn't judge. The wind didn't care. For 6 long years, his days followed the rhythm of survival, chopping wood, tracking elk, fixing radio towers, making coffee on a battered iron stove. His evenings were quieter still, filled only with the sounds of crackling fire and the echo of things unsaid. Zach had learned to live with the silence. He even thought, perhaps, that he deserved it. Then, on an ordinary Thursday, something shifted. He was at the old general store 3 towns south, restocking canned beans and buying kerosene, when his eyes caught a yellowing bulletin board beside the register. Tacked among dog-sitting offers and lost tool ads, there was a postcard with handwriting that looked rushed, maybe even nervous. Lonely woman seeking a quiet harbor. I can cook. I'm not afraid of wild places. Write to Lauren in Texas. That was it. No phone number, no picture. Just ink and loneliness, and a strange kind of bravery. He didn't know why he tore it down. Maybe it was the way Quiet Harbor sounded. Maybe it was the way her message didn't try to sell anything. It didn't promise beauty or bliss, just survival, the kind he understood. That night, under dim lantern light, Zach wrote a letter he never imagined writing. He kept it simple, honest. My name is Zachary. I live in the woods. I'm not good at small talk, but I make strong coffee. 2 weeks later, he got a reply. Her letters became a rhythm. A new season. They wrote about books, weather, regret, childhood pets, and things they never told anyone else. The mail came once a week, but it felt like a heartbeat returning to a chest that had long gone still. Autumn came, and so did she. Lauren arrived on a wet afternoon in late October, tall, lean, with a steely calm and eyes that had seen too much. She had a single duffel bag, calloused hands, and a voice like dried leaves rustling across old porch steps. There was something unfinished in her, not broken, but paused. She never asked about the scars Zach tried to hide, and he didn't ask about the ones she didn't. Together, they started again. They fixed the sagging porch, built a garden from scratch, boiled river water for tea. She cooked over open fire, made bread in cast iron, and laughed. Not often, but when she did, it made Zach forget the years that came before. In the mornings, he'd wake to her humming softly by the window. In the evenings, she'd fall asleep beside him as snow tapped gently at the cabin walls. They didn't speak of the past, and that was their unspoken pact. It was too good, too steady, like a windless lake before the storm. And maybe that's why it felt so fragile. The first sign wasn't obvious, not to an outsider. But Zach knew the look. It was in the way Lauren's body stiffened mid-sentence, her hand frozen above the coffee pot as the satellite phone vibrated on the counter. That phone rarely rang. It wasn't meant to. She stared at it like it had crawled up from the grave. Then she picked it up, slowly, and stepped out onto the porch where the mountains swallowed the signal into silence. Zack heard nothing but wind and birdsong, until she returned, pale, shaking. She tried to smile, as if it were just bad weather, but her hands betrayed her, trembling like a branch holding too much snow. She sat down, then stood up, then folded a napkin into a tight square over and over again. Zack didn't press. He had seen panic like that before, years ago, on other faces, in other tragedies, and he knew something was coming, something that didn't knock. That night, the rain came hard. It beat against the roof, like it was asking to be let in. Lauren finally spoke. Her voice was low, measured, but it trembled at the edges like something kept barely caged. "I wasn't always called Lauren," she began. "Back in Texas, I was married to a man named Daniel Spaulding." She didn't use the word sheriff with pride. She said it like a warning. He wasn't just a lawman. He was the law, respected, feared, and behind closed doors, possessive in ways no one questioned. For years, she tried to believe she could fix it, that if she were quieter, smaller, gentler, he might love her right. But love never came, only silence and control, and one day a locked room and too many unanswered calls. So she ran, changed her name, left everything. She didn't just disappear. She erased herself, changed towns, documents, even faked her death with the help of someone who owed her a kindness. It worked, for a time, until now. "I don't know how," she whispered, eyes glassy. "But he found me." Zack sat motionless. Not because he didn't believe her, but because he did. He knew what obsession looked like, what it did to a man who felt entitled to ownership, not love. She told him there had been a photo. Weeks earlier, a friendly old man in the nearest town had snapped a picture of them at the general store, labeled it something harmless. "Wild couple in the mountains, living the dream." Then uploaded it to a town newsletter that somehow found its way online. And Daniel Spaulding, a man who never forgot what he believed was his, had seen it. "He called today," Lauren said. "Didn't yell, didn't threaten, just said, 'You can't run, Lauren. I'm close.'" Silence wrapped the room like a shroud. Zack didn't speak. He didn't promise protection or vengeance. He knew words were cheap in moments like this. What mattered was breath and timing, and staying upright when the world started to tilt. The next morning the cabin was quiet. Too quiet. The fire had gone out. Her boots were missing from the door. Her coat, her bag, gone. On the pillow beside him, the one she always crumpled in her sleep, lay her silver medallion. The one she never removed. The one engraved with the name she never told anyone until Zack. No note, no trail, no goodbye. She had walked out of the only safe place she had ever known, not to hide, but to draw danger away from him, from them. Zack stood there for a long time, not breathing, not blinking, just staring at that empty space beside him. He had lost once before, in a fire that took more than a friend, and he had promised himself he would never go through that again. But now there was no choice. This time he wouldn't wait to bury the past. This time he would chase it down. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He just moved. Zack packed light, a worn canvas rucksack, a thermos of strong coffee, and his old hunting rifle, not for intimidation, but for what might be necessary. There was no trail, no map, just instinct, the kind only years in the wild could sharpen, and something deeper, the unspoken language of someone who loved without question. Each step carried him further from safety and closer to something far more dangerous than any bear or storm, a man driven by ownership disguised as love. By dusk, Zack reached the place no one went anymore. The abandoned sawmill nestled in the pines like a wound the forest had tried to forget. Half collapsed, half standing, its walls leaned like tired shoulders, the air thick with rust, rot, and dread. And there she was, Lauren, tied to a support beam, bruised but breathing. Her head hung forward, but the moment Zack stepped through the shadows, She lifted it. Their eyes met, not in panic, but in recognition. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply looked at him like someone who had already made peace with the cost of her choices. Then Zach saw him, Daniel Spaulding, standing near the far wall, calm, composed, a hand resting near his belt, eyes locked on Zach with that cold, patient hatred that had no need for words. It wasn't surprise he saw in Spaulding's eyes, it was calculation, the quiet kind that said, "I always knew you'd come." Zach didn't speak. He raised the rifle and fired, not to kill, but to end it. The shot hit Spaulding in the shoulder, spinning him off his feet. A deliberate aim, a message. You won't decide how this ends. While Spaulding lay stunned, groaning but conscious, Zach crossed the space between him and Lauren. The ropes came loose quickly. Her wrists were marked, but she was still strong. She stood, swayed slightly, and then steadied herself. She didn't ask how he found her. She didn't ask why he came. She just whispered, "I thought if I left, you'd stay alive. I couldn't lose someone else because of me." Zach didn't flinch. "I already died when you walked out that door," he said. Outside, the sound of tires crunching gravel signaled the arrival of the sheriff's deputies. Real ones. One of the local rangers had spotted Spaulding's truck near the ridge. The manhunt had been quiet, but constant. Now it was over. Spaulding lived. But his silence didn't. Charges came swiftly, not just for what happened at the mill, but for everything Lauren had been too afraid to say until now. With her alive and ready to testify, the past he buried came crawling back into daylight. Time passed. A year later, the cabin looked different. Warmer, lived in. Lauren taught online courses for women in rural communities, helping them recognize red flags, navigate the law, and find their footing again. She rarely used her old name, but she never denied it. Her voice, once low and careful, now held steady even when telling hard truths. Zach spent his afternoons hiking with teens from the nearby counties. Kids labeled troubled by a system that never listened. He didn't preach. He just taught them how to track deer, build fires, and notice the way trees bent before storms, how to hear things most people missed. And together they lived, not in a fairy tale, not without scars, but in something real. Love didn't save them, it chose them. Day after day, even when it hurt, even when the silence returned, even when memory tried to rewrite what they'd survived. They stayed. Because in a world that had taken too much from both of them, choosing each other, fully, freely, was the only thing that ever felt like freedom.